Thank you for the introduction. I'm actually going to start out with the drink of water. So I work for the MPO in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, and we conducted a mitigation assessment for wetland and streams. This was associated with compensatory mitigation for the Clean Water Act. So in my presentation, I'll kind of step you through the different phases of our project, and I will talk about the shortcomings of that project, of which there were many, and then also the outcomes of that project. This was a really neat project for us. It wasn't just a report that then goes and sits on a shelf. We were able to actually engage in some activities to follow up. We received money from the Federal Highway Administration to do this project. We conducted a supply and demand analysis. We wanted to see whether there were shortages of wetland or stream credits in our region, because of course, as you all know, if there aren't any credits, this can delay your project and it can increase your costs. I'm going to emphasize streams in this presentation. When we initially started this project, we were just going to look at wetlands. The Corps of Engineers strongly encouraged us to look at streams too, because that's where they felt there was a shortage of credits in our region. Also, as an MPO, we are required to look at potential mitigation opportunities in our region. So North Central Texas Council of Governments covers 12 counties in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's a really large region. As one of the other presenters said, there are millions of people up there. We include 3 Omernic Level 3 ecoregions, 4 major river basins, and that is relevant in terms of identifying service areas for mitigation banks. We also, in our region, are building several new construction highways, some of which are really quite long. So here is our region. We did a series of maps. We did them for wetlands and for the different categories of streams, the ephemeral, intermittent, and perennial. And we looked at available stream credits as communicated by the RIBITS database from the Corps of Engineers. And I added the word here, estimated availability, because the data in RIBITS isn't necessarily accurate. It does not include pre-sold credits. And this can be a pretty big deal. You can look there and you can think that for your project, this mitigation banker has hundreds, maybe even 1,000 credits available. And you call them up and want to buy the credits, and you're told, sorry, they've been pre-sold, but they're not in RIBITS because they're not associated with a permit number yet. So I'll show you these maps and let you know that they're actually wildly inaccurate, potentially. But this is looking at in-channel stream credits. The Corps of Engineers Fort Worth District has a stream mitigation method that seeks for 50% of the credits you purchase for mitigation to be these in-channel credits, if such credits are available. In the right-hand corner, you can see that I wrote that this is updated data. I downloaded this in August of 2017. Our project was completed with data that I believe we downloaded in January of 2016, and it painted a very different picture. At the time, there were very few credits up in Collin County, and actually here, right now, you're seeing few credits up in Collin County, but in the next map, these are the riparian buffer credits, a different category of stream credits that you can purchase. Here you're seeing there are a number of credits in Collin County, something in the 700s probably. But back when we first did this project, there were very few credits up there. And this is a concern. Collin County is growing very rapidly. I think we're projecting that eventually Collin County will have more people than Dallas County. If I had downloaded this data in the middle of July of this year, the picture would have been very different, because in the end of July, we had one banker release thousands of credits. And so that's one of the shortcomings that I'll talk a little bit more about later, and that this data is really very variable. And here's the picture from legacy stream credits. These are credits that aren't actually stream oriented. They may have been upland buffer credits that when the Corps of Engineers in the Fort Worth District began using its stream mitigation method, they're allowing these credits to be purchased. Also, if you've gone through their methodology of first selecting the in-channel credits and then the riparian buffer credits. And so if we flip back to the beginning and you look down in southern Johnson County and where those highways kind of come together there, that's a town called Cleburne. It's a growing town. No perennial stream credits, and again, none, and again, none. Here's another layer of data. These are legacy stream credits just in general. Previous legacy credits were specifically for perennial streams. So with these, you're competing against any impact to streams in terms of purchasing these credits. And now Cleburne has about 111. The reason that that's cross-hatched is because this particular mitigation bank with these cross-hatched 111 legacy credits is an older bank, and it doesn't follow the same service area boundaries that the Corps of Engineers is currently using. Now to move on to the demand part of the project, we again use data from the RIBITS database to look at how many credits are being purchased each year. On average, per permit, folks were purchasing more than 115 credits. Now, a median would probably have been a better measure in this case because you can look at 2012, and green represents transportation. That was a huge purchase of credits, I believe for a construction project, a highway construction project in Tyler. But you can also see that, prior to 2011, stream credits weren't really being purchased in the region. And these are purchases from banks that serve our region, but aren't necessarily located in our region. So they're also serving other regions. So we have to compete against other regions. But you can see, as I said, that in earlier years on this graph, there simply were not stream credit purchases because the Fort Worth district wasn't using its stream mitigation method until 2013. And the fact that they just started that method to try and fit in with the in-kind requirement of the 2008 final rule is leading to our shortage in stream credits. If you look at the yellow, that's real estate, and we identified that industry as being transportation's greatest competitor for stream mitigation credits. When we did a similar bar graph for wetland credits, our greatest competitor was the oil and gas industry, though their purchases have slowed down in the past couple of years. Another phase of our demand analysis was to estimate the demand created by roadway projects in Mobility 2040. That is our current long-range transportation plan. And again, I use the word estimated because for a lot of reasons, we're not exactly sure how many credits these projects will generate. We looked at a number of other agencies' projects, and some of them said, well, for every impact, we're going to assume 3 credits need to be purchased. And we didn't want to be that finite. We didn't want to claim to know something we didn't actually know. So we just used the categories high, medium, low, or none. So if the roadway project was just more of a maintenance or a restriping project and didn't increase the width of the roadway, we just assumed it didn't have an impact. But you can see up here, one of our new roadway projects here and another one here are expected to have high impacts on perennial streams in this example. So we looked at an estimated width of the roadway or the additional lanes, just taking typical widths for lanes, medians, shoulders, et cetera, and looking at the number of crossings. So we did this also for intermittent streams and ultimately for wetlands too. We couldn't do this for ephemeral streams because there is no spatial data available in our area for ephemeral streams. We had some great participation from stakeholders on this project. The Corps of Engineers was incredibly valuable in simply teaching us about mitigation. Parks and Wildlife participated. Natural Resources Conservation Service participated. It was their state wetland scientist. We actually had 3 different layers of data for wetlands. We had the NLCD, the NWI, and Texas Parks and Wildlife's Ecological Mapping Systems of Texas. And our state wetland scientists actually felt that the combination of the three actually best represented wetlands in our region, particularly in Hunt County, which has more of an East Texas ecosystem. So these bottom four groups helped us analyze spatial data and select spatial data to use in a model to identify potential mitigation sites. So these are the layers of data we initially used to help identify those potential mitigation sites and sort of rank stream segments across our region. We borrowed the term absolute and relative factors from a project in the state of Maryland. And absolute factors were kind of ruling a stream segment in or out. So for example, kind of a no-brainer, it had to be a stream segment on the National Hydrography Dataset, but it could not be an existing conservation easement. These other layers that you see here were weighted to help us establish a score. So these kind of Technicolor stream segments, we actually created a map of this for our entire region. So in the interest of time, I've narrowed it down to this one map that only shows these scores for stream segments in the primary service areas of our new construction highway projects. So we took these stream segments and applied additional layers to them. We didn't include these additional layers in our initial analysis because some of these data sets are a little hard to work with. Our land use data set is humongous, as is your PALM data set on archaeological liability. We ruled out anything that was a brownfield or a Superfund site. And we came up with this. So these are sites that we think could do a good job mitigating for these new construction projects, but also create the greatest ecological benefit. And that last part's pretty important because the numbers of credits you generate from a mitigation project depends on the ecological lift of that project. So the better ecological benefit you create, potentially, the more credits you produce. We weren't too surprised about that one in Northwest Denton County. We already have a mitigation bank up there, and that same banker is applying to create a new bank in that same area. We were surprised by the site in eastern Dallas County. That's near Mesquite. For those of you who are familiar, that's a pretty urban area, so we were surprised. So the shortcomings, I have already talked about Ribbit's database. This is a snapshot in time. You could download data 1 week, and 2 weeks later, you could download the data and it would paint a very different picture. It also, as I said, does not account for those pre-sold credits. The planning horizon, we have to have at least a 20-year planning horizon for our long-range plan. For some of these maps that I showed you, I used an interim year analysis of 2027, but even that's a little lengthy for a mitigation banker in their own planning process. I'm not sure if this is that relevant to you guys, and maybe you guys can answer that in the question and answer, but I know from a project that TTI has produced that you guys take bids on credits. A lot of our work was done identifying things in primary service areas, so maybe in your bidding process that becomes less relevant. There are some shortcomings in the data we used. For example, in the wetlands part of the project, hydric soils was one of our weighted factors, and yet the hydric soils data, you know, we show hydric soils all up through Dallas County, and as soon as you get to the Collin County line, they disappear. And that doesn't seem very natural to me, and the way our wetland scientist explained it is it's possible that different teams were doing different counties, and they identified hydric soils differently. Also, as I also described, we have 3 different layers for wetland data, and they vary considerably. And also, we do not have any spatial data on ephemeral streams. In our method, we're not able to identify waters of the US, so we don't know if those stream segments are jurisdictional or not. We don't know the widths of streams, so again, the impacts are just estimates. And again, we also estimated the widths of roadways. We don't take into account the ability to avoid impacts or minimize impacts. And we don't look at these terms that you all are probably a lot more familiar with than I am, given that we don't work on the NEPA phase of projects, but the project doesn't address single and complete linear transportation projects or separate and distinct crossings. We did identify that there's competition from other industries, but we can't really estimate how high that competition is. But our region is growing like crazy. I think we're actually now at 7.1 now, if you use the ACS data, 7.1 million, and we're projecting about 10 or so million for 2040. So as I said, fortunately, this was not a study that is just sitting on a shelf. We are doing something about it. We had identified that developers and builders were our greatest competitors, so we went ahead and held a workshop with them. And the Corps of Engineers gave some presentations about how developers and builders could avoid and minimize their impacts on waters. And that would free up some credits for us. If they don't have to buy credits, then there's more credits left over for transportation. We are also planning to conduct a webinar for mitigation bankers across the United States to just communicate to them that we may have some supply and demand issues for stream credits and try and encourage them to look into whether they would want to establish a bank in our area. We are actually hoping to get some TxDOT participation in that webinar. And this next one, I wish I'd put the word pending on here. I had been told that the work scope would be approved by the beginning of this fiscal year, and that hasn't happened yet, but we are hoping to put together an inventory of sites where cities have identified a need to improve streams, but they don't have the money to do the work, and put that out there as a database so that folks who do need to engage in permitting responsible mitigation can connect with those cities and do a project that would both generate the credits that the permit holder needs and that would also benefit the city. We also plan to do part of this analysis with each long-range plan. We're currently working on Mobility 2045 and hope to have that plan approved in June of 2018. Another recommendation from our study was to seek approval from our policy board that we should only conduct mitigation or should only purchase mitigation in our primary service areas in order to reduce the mitigation costs. We're not really pursuing any action based on this recommendation because of TxDOT's bidding process, and I'm not sure how that would affect this. So that's my contact information. It would have been useful for me also to share a link to this report. This was a very abbreviated presentation. We had about 90 figures in that report, so there's a lot more to it, but maybe TxDOT Brian can share that with everybody in the future.